Land was settled through the McKee Purchase Treaty of 1790, and we as beneficiaries of the treaty must recognize our responsibilities, including our collective responsibilities to the land and water. Mr. Mayor, we did have one supplementary agenda item. On Thursday, the clerk's office emailed out number 17E. Number 17E was the addition from a previous meeting where motion by Councillor Latimer regarding the rezoning to protect woodlot features at no cost. So that was added to the agenda. Disclosures of pecuniary interest. There is one for this evening. Councillor Carmen McGregor has declared a conflict with regards to item 10E, the application for consent and zoning bylaw amendment for the estate of Michael Routier. And we'll move into planning services now, and I'll pass it over to Ryan Jakes.
Thank you, Judy. I will ask that Anthony Jass set us up at this point.
Thank you, Judy and Mayor Caniff. Planning meeting process. The process to be followed for each application will be as follows. 1, the clerk will announce each individual planning item. 2, the clerk will advise if any written submissions have been received regarding a planning item. If so, the clerk will read the written submissions that have been received. 3, for any items where a written submission is received, administration will proceed with the presentation. 4, council will be asked if it has any questions of administration or the applicant, if present. 5, council will be asked what action it wishes to take with regard to the item. Notice, if any person or public body that files an appeal of a decision of council in respect of the proposed applications does not make a submission to the municipal clerk before the proposal is approved, they are not entitled to appeal a decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal, if otherwise eligible, unless in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party to the appeal. Notice of passing. Information on council's actions tonight will be posted on the municipal website. All persons who have made a request or who have made a submission regarding a particular planning item will receive a notice of council's decision, including appeal procedures. Any other person who wishes to receive a notice of decision must submit a written request to the municipal clerk.
Okay, planning item 10A.
10A, application for zoning bylaw amendment. Sani Energy Inc., 1119 Dufferin Avenue, Community of Wallaceburg. There were no deputations received on this item, and the applicant is not on the line.
Councillor Hall and Councillor C. McGregor, can I get you to move this, please?
Yes, happy to move, Mayor Caniff. I also have a couple of questions for staff as well.
Okay.
Happy to second.
Councillor Hall, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mayor Caniff. Just a few questions for Ryan or Anthony. I'm not sure who's taking it, but and these were relayed to me from members of the community, specifically residents who live in the residential area that are abutting this commercial property that we're discussing tonight. So first of all, a concern that was raised to me. So having a drive-through stacking lane will cause further traffic congestion and further increases risk to pedestrians, and further reducing the required drive-through stacking lane length by 6.5 meters causes even more traffic congestion, furthering risk to pedestrians. So Ryan or Anthony, can you address these concerns?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. This is Ryan Jocks, Director of Planning Services. With respect to the questions, I'd lay out that this subject property is part of an established and mature highway commercial area in the community of Wallaceburg. Dufferin Avenue is generally developed in a number of commercial uses to serve local residents as well as the traveling public. The application before council by the property's owner is proposing to reinvest in the property by developing a restaurant with an associated drive-through lane. This type of development is wholly encouraged and supported by Chatham-Kent's land use policies for a highway commercial area as set out in the official plan. With respect to the specific zoning bylaw amendment request with regard to the reduction in stacking lane length, This is a reduction by approximately 1 car length to the standard in which is set out in the zoning bylaw. This has been reviewed by the Technical Advisory Committee, and given the size of the restaurant and the property configurations, no concerns with regard to the impairment of traffic on Dufferin Avenue were a concern, and the recommendation is supported by the Technical Advisory Committee. As with any property developing in adjacent to a residential subdivision, site plan tools will be employed to mitigate to a reasonable extent some of the impacts that a commercial property may have on neighboring residential properties. If the zoning bylaw amendment tonight is approved, the applicant is expected to proceed with a site plan application process to the municipality. There will be a site review, and certain mitigating features will likely be recommended, such as a solid board fence in the rear of the property where the property abuts the residential uses to the south. This is not unlike many other areas in highway commercial zones where drive-through stacking lanes abut residential uses. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Another concern that was raised to me, and if we approve this application, the concern was that property values for the neighboring homes to this property may be affected. Can you address that, Ryan?
I can. So property values as a singular issue do not form part of land use planning policy. It's not directed through the provincial policy statement or Chatham-Kent official plan. Typically, impacts on different property types are mitigated generally through zoning, whereas different types of neighborhoods, such as industrial or commercial or residential, are generally located apart from one another. But in this case, obviously, a commercial neighborhood abuts a residential neighborhood. So it's difficult to quantify any impact on property values, as this is a complex relationship between many factors. But looking at this issue as a whole, the revitalization of a commercial neighborhood within our municipality ultimately will lead to an increase in property assessment value and revitalization of the commercial neighborhood. So there could be effects both ways, but it's not a singular issue in which these recommendations are made to council. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Ryan. And one last concern, and I think you actually answered my last question I was going to ask, so that's great. But one more concern, and I guess it has to do with the amount of light from cars from the property, especially once again related directly to the people that are directly behind this proposed drive-through, along with some of the increased noise that might be expected, especially, I'm not sure what to call it, but kind of the outside kind of ordering station where people might place the orders with the speakers and that sort of thing. But can you address that, Ryan, as well?
Yes, I can. So the zoning bylaw sets out a specific provision with regard to the speaker. So the standard regulation in Chatham-Kent is that the speaker be not directed toward any abutting residential zone and be at least 8 meters away from a residential property line. The preliminary site plan that is included in council's report demonstrates that the location is in compliance with this regulation. And also, when we're evaluating a site plan for approval, there are policies, and it is a good consideration to address any mitigating measures that might be appropriate at this given site. So we've only done a preliminary review of the existing fences in the rear of the property. It's a combination of solid board, older board on board, and chain link. So as we go through this process, I fully expect that administration will recommend that a solid board fence be erected across the entire of the rear property line as a mitigation measure against light in particular. Noise is a little bit different. Typically, only when uses that will exceed a certain threshold, such as car wash blowers or things of that nature, are established, are noise mitigation measures required. But it should be expected that ambient noise from Dufferin Avenue and from the general use of this property will continue. Thank you.
Right. Thanks for the clarification on all those questions. I'll definitely share that with the folks that I spoke to about this. And thanks as well for your obviously in the report it details that this is recommended and meets the requirements under planning and provincial policy and everything. And I think it'll be a good boost to the community. And just want to thank the applicants for continuing to invest in their business and grow their business and bring something new to the community of Wallsford. So thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in and motion passes. Moving on to 10B, applications for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, 1061139 Ontario Limited, 7659 Queens Line, Community of Chatham City. We have not received a deputation on this particular application, and the applicant's representative, David French, is on the line.
Councillor Solomon and Councillor Finn, can I get you to move this, please?
Moved.
Seconded.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
Judy, mine closed before I could hit submit. I was just
Mine
going
too,
to
Judy.
tell you this.
Yeah,
Mine too.
okay, I can see everyone's. We'll have IT relaunch it. 1 second, please. Okay, thanks for your patience. We've just redid it and it should be up on the screen right shortly. There you go. All votes are in, motion passes. Moving on to 10C, application for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, Peter and Herbert Groenwagen, 11344 St. Clair Line, Community of Harwich, South Kent. We have not received any deputations on this particular application, and the applicant is not on the line.
Councillor Sakachi and Councillor Thompson, can I get you to move this, please?
So moved, Mayor Caniff. And seconded.
Seeing no questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in and motion passes. Moving on to 10D, application for zoning bylaw amendment, Inches Avenue Office and Storage Limited, 270 Inches Ave, Community of Chatham City. No deputations were received on this item and the applicant is not present.
Councillor B. McGregor and Councillor Bondi, can I get you to move this, please?
I'll move it. And seconded.
Seeing no questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in and motion passes. And moving on to the final planning application 10E, application for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, estate of Michael Ratier, 7205 Otter Line, Community of Chatham Township, North Kent, and Councillor McGregor has declared a conflict on this particular application. No deputations have been received and the applicant is not on the line.
Councillor Foss and Councillor McGrail, can I get you to move this, please?
Also move it, but I do have a concern.
Okay.
And I'll second.
Councillor Foss, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. We received a letter from the St. Clair Conservation Authority regarding this application. So I've talked to Ryan prior to this meeting and asked him if he would give us sort of an overview of his concerns regarding that correspondence.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff, Councillor Foss. The nature of this application, just to provide some context, is to support a family in the estate planning of the subject property. The application consists of essentially two severances and a zoning application. The first severance application is to split the farm holding into two separate farm parcels. This severance essentially reestablishes what were former farms that had been consolidated over time. And it's the intent of the estate to reestablish these farms for their purposes. The second consent or severance is to sever a surplus dwelling and associated buildings onto its own lot. Through the nature of this application, the balance of one of the farms where the surplus dwelling is coming off will no longer permit development of another dwelling. However, the creation of the second farm, or the new farm parcel, does come along with development rights for a dwelling. So it is these development rights which the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority has taken issue with in relationship to provincial policy. So there has long been a provincial policy that essentially says, development should not be directed to areas where there's not safe access in times of a flood event. And this is an issue that council may be familiar with through some previous planning applications, particularly what I'll refer to as the L'Arche application in Ward 1, which council considered last year. It's the same issue, this time being raised by the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority. So in essence, what the St. Clair region is pointing out and objecting to in their letter is the creation of a property in which there will be development rights for a dwelling where the roadway that accesses the property could be underwater or would be underwater in a regulatory flood event. So this is an issue known to Chatham-Kent administration, and like I said, council has actually dealt with this particular provincial policy on a different occasion. So with respect to the Conservation Authority letter, I do still recommend that council proceed to consider approving this recommendation tonight. The broader issue of provincial policy and having a debate around that would be best served in a different forum and not on the floor during this very specific planning application. In the future, it is the intent of Chatham-Kent to address this policy through a public process where provincial agencies such as conservation authorities, as well as the general public, are invited to participate in the creation or amendment of any land use policies that we might have. In general, it's my recommendation that restricting development rights across Chatham-Kent, where road elevation in particular is an issue, has far-reaching consequences and should have its own forum for that in a robust public process as well. I hope that answers your question, Councillor Frost, but happy to elaborate if needed. Thank you.
I just have one question, I guess, Ryan, regarding the law would be, in Chatham-Kent's opinion, a law that a development could take place. But before a development can take place, the Conservation Authority permit is required. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So to erect buildings on the site, if that is a decision that the owners make in the future, there's two regulatory bodies that the owners would seek permits from. The first, Chatham-Kent, and that would be a permit through the building department. And the second is the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority, who has jurisdiction over this regulated area. And the Conservation Authority could consider that permit and impose conditions or choose to restrict development if that was the decision of the Conservation Authority and any outcomes of any hearings that may occur.
Okay, so it'd be safe to say that would give the conservation some safeguards that before development takes place, it still has to meet their criteria.
That's my understanding. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and the applicants, are they aware of that?
Yes, through the pre-consultation process, municipal planners did convey this information to the applicants.
Okay, that's good. Thanks, Ryan.
Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I think Councillor Foss's last question around the Conservation Authority approval requirement answered my question, and I just wanted to share some thoughts with this on council, as it is in Ward 1 where we have had this issue kind of just down and around the corner along the Thames River. And as I understand it, there is potential processes in place where homeowners can create safety plans or evacuation plans and generators, things like that, that can be put in place if they are erecting new builds to ensure their safety in the event that the road would be flooded and there wouldn't be any access to that point. So, I really look forward to our planning department and Bruce's team and Ryan's team actually connecting with the conservation authorities about this at a greater issue, because I think we're going to run into this more often than not when it comes to some of these hazard lands. We're surrounded by water and we are under the sea level in Chatham-Kent. So it's an issue, but I am happy to support this application because I don't think that we should be hindering development in our areas, in our community because of it. And I think there are ways we can mitigate against the risk rather than just simply saying no.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in and motion passes. We'll move on to deputations now. Council, we have received 5 deputations for items that are on the current agenda, and the clerk's office will read them now. The first 4 applications refer to item number 17E on the agenda, the motion by Councillor Latimer regarding the rezoning to protect woodlot features at no cost. First deputation is from Rock Jaluk, a farmer and woodlot owner in Ridgetown. Honorable Mayor and Council, this is in response to the rezoning to protect woodlots at no cost motion by Councillor Latimer. I do not agree with this motion as I don't think that it will do what it is intended to accomplish. I have some questions, however. 1, how will it protect forest in Chatham-Kent if it's not enforced? 2, what will the cost be of all this rezoning be and who pays for this? Rezoning can cost $2,000 to $5,000 per application. If 500 woodlots get rezoned every year, then the cost could add up considerably, $10 to $25 million, question mark. Would the municipality be comfortable paying for this? Wouldn't a conservation bylaw, like our neighboring municipalities, be a lower cost and proven method to protect our 3% forest cover? Lambton and Elgin have these conservation bylaws, are protecting 13% forest cover and have a strong ALUS program. Surely we can protect a mere 3%. Thank you, Rock Jaluk.
The next deputation is from Ken Bell. I would like to address Councillor Latimer's motion of voluntary rezoning of significant woodlands presently zoned agricultural to open space for conservation. We understand that there have been a few cases where properties were sold with the hopes that woodlands would be spared. Then after the sale, people were saddened to see the destructive development of these woodlands. We emphasize with them. The motion would be of some help in future instances where similar situations may arise, but a bylaw protecting forests would make such a motion unnecessary and would save taxpayers the cost associated with a piecemeal approach. Woodlands that are presently under threat of being clear-cut for agriculture would not be voluntarily rezoned. They're under the protection of a temporary bylaw that, if lifted, would spell their demise. The woodlands are home to tens of thousands of animals and fungi, none of which would recover after a slash and burn development. They would be dead, and in some cases, entire species driven to extinction. Chatham-Kent will not be a sacrificial lamb of state capitalism. That preserved form of capitalism consumes its very foundation. The value of society and nature of woodlands goes far beyond standing timber and aesthetic value. Municipal councils and farmers across Ontario have known this for decades and had no problems protecting forests while still maintaining a healthy agricultural base. The province has more than adequate incentive programs to offset taxes, but incentives will not save the forests of Chatham-Kent. Clear cutting of forests may provide profit individuals, but cost all society because of tax write-offs of the clear cutting itself, not to mention all the values woodlots provide. There are those who may never understand or flatly reject the concept of intrinsic value. There have been, over the past 3 or 4 decades, a trend in society to confuse value with price. Although price is a human economic measure, the value of a thing extends beyond human needs. Without ecosystems, human beings would never have evolved and never have survived to this point where we grant ourselves the privileges of mindless extraction and limitless growth, all the while ignoring the costs of our peril. From the Code of Hammurabi, the present day, those societies that last longest, to those with the strongest laws that protected the common good and individuals in that order. The forests of Chatham-Kent are part of that common good and need protection from the ravages of greed. Ken Bell.
The next deputation is from Earl Johnson, the Acting Secretary of REALM, which stands for Regenerative Agricultural Land Use Management Farm Group. Mayor Caniff and councillors, just to make you aware, the zoning proposal by Claire Latimer is not a new concept in regards to resolving the clear-cutting deforestation situation in Chatham-Kent. When this issue arose in 2013, REALM explored this possibility and considerable thought went into how such a planning tool could be used. There have also been discussions with administration over the years concerning its potential use. Unfortunately, unless such a proposal has some sort of regulatory teeth on a volunteer basis, it will not address the situation we face. REALM considered a type of zoning, environmental assessment permit system, whereby clear cutting could be discouraged, but even that might not have deterred determined interests from carrying out deforestation. However, zoning is an additional tool that could help supplement any plan for long-term sustainability of our forest lands and certainly deserves further consideration. For now, we would encourage you to question this motion because of these deficiencies, even though some might see it as the entire solution to our present challenge. Frankly, it must be viewed as similar to the previous NHIS program. Unless we have a regulatory component, a small minority of landowners will continue to neglect our forest stewardship goals and practices, causing this issue to continue as it has. Earl Johnson.
The next deputation is from Patricia McGorman, President, Canada South Land Trust. Chatham-Kent Municipal Council. The Canada South Land Trust is a registered charitable organization incorporated in 2002. It is one of many land trusts in Ontario. Our stated mission is to protect natural heritage sites for future generations in Chatham-Kent, Essex County, the City of Windsor, and Pelee Island. We are submitting this letter for deputation as required to address the motion of Councillor Latimer regarding rezoning to protect woodlot features at no cost. That interested landowners that wish to voluntarily have their woodlot features rezoned for a long-term clear-cutting protection may do so at no cost by contacting the Chatham-Kent Planning Services. The Canada South Land Trust, as well as other land trusts, have received approval from under the Canadian federal government's Ecological Gift Program started in 1995. Through this program, the landowners can receive financial compensation through their income tax for conserving ecologically significant lands in perpetuity. Our concerns with this motion are written as primarily 1, the potential for misinterpretation of protections already afforded to the provincial policy statement and consequently the Chatham-Kent official plan. 2, that the destruction of hundreds of acres of significant natural heritage sites already afforded legislation protections have taken place under current and recent government oversight. 3, that landowners who have committed to conserving their lands have significant natural heritage features and functions may miss out on opportunities for independent safeguarding. And 4, finally, and most importantly, landowners may miss out on financial compensation for their long-term commitments. We encourage stakeholders to review the Ecological Gifts Program, which can be found on the Government of Canada website, and to consider partnerships where their primary objectives of organizations are for the long-term protection of the ecologically significant heritage sites. We look forward to hearing back from you in response to this submission, and thank you in advance. Sincerely, Patricia McGorman.
And the final deputation is on item 17A, and it's from John Sarapinkus. It's with regard to the Natural Heritage Strategy Terms of Reference. It is unfortunate that those affected by the natural heritage strategy are excluded from participation at this time, and that it will move forward under the direction of those who will not be affected or have no financial and other investments at stake. People don't fault me for being concerned in light of recent developments surrounding this issue. I and others are not able to verify if our online survey was excluded. We have not been presented with the roundtable discussion summaries, and there is a frustrating delay in the expected canopy cover report. By proposing to drag this issue months going forward, even into the next election, and it appears that there is no will to work together to find consensus and a resolution. With every delay and the exclusion of all the affected parties, you are not fostering cooperation and trust of this process. In the end, I trust the ultimate goal is not to have a bylaw with a more acceptable title.
That ends our deputations, and we'll move on to the consent agenda. This evening, we've had the following reports pulled for discussion. First, 14A, which is the KPMG interim report, and there will be a presentation done by KPMG. 16A, strategy for sustainable public transit delivery, Councillor Kirkwood-White and Councillor Latimer. Item 17A, Natural Heritage Advisory Committee terms of reference, pulled by Councillor Latimer, Councillor Kirkwood-White, and Councillor Sakachi. 17B, Ontario Heritage Act Designation Bylaw, 30 Elwood Avenue, Community of Chatham City, pulled by Councillor Kirkwood-White. Item 17D, motion of Councillor Sakachi regarding property standards backlog, pulled by Councillor Sakachi and Councillor Thompson. And the final report pulled this evening is 17E, rezoning to protect woodlot features at no cost, and this has been pulled by Councillor Latimer and Councillor Hall. Therefore, Mr.
Madam
Mayor,
Clerk,
yes.
excuse me, I forgot to put on Councillor Fawz's motion. I forgot to send that in to you. I'm sorry. I want it pulled as well.
Okay, so we will pull
Thank
report 18A. We'll just need 1 second to amend the motion. 1 second, please.
And Madam Clerk, it's Councillor Latimer. I did not pull my motion. So I will speak to it since it's been pulled, but I did not initiate.
Councillor Latimer, I listed it just because another councillor had pulled it, and therefore because it's your motion, I wanted you to be able to have the first opportunity to speak to it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Judy, do you need a seconder for Steve's motion?
No, we'll get down to that when we get down to the agenda. Right now, we're just on consent agenda. So council remaining for consent agenda are items 13A and 13B, which are both sets of minutes, item 15A and 17C. So we'll just wait for the motion to get up on the screen, and then we will be able to vote on that, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Harrigan and Councillor Wright, can you each move the consent agenda, please?
I will move the consent agenda, Mayor Canna.
I will second it. Thank you.
Any questions? Hearing none, we'll put it to vote.
Just waiting for one more, councillors. Okay, all votes are in and motion passes.
Okay, we'll go to item 14, Finance, Budget, Information Technology, and Transformation.
We have the KPMG interim report, and I'll pass it over to Gord Quinton.
Thank you. It's Gord Quinton, Chief Financial Officer, speaking. On Council, on April 26th, you awarded the Core Services Base Budget Review to KPMG. Just letting you know that we were also successful in receiving the Municipal Modernization Grant from the province. That is funding 65% of the cost of the study. So we thank the province for their support in this. Tonight we have Kate Denbach and Suk Betty from KPMG to present their interim findings. This information is included in the report tonight, was a requirement of the provincial grant process to be the information delivered tonight and the recommendations to come later in November. So I will pass it over to the KPMG team for the presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gord. And I believe Suk is just going to share our slide deck here momentarily. Perfect. Hopefully everyone can see that. First of all, thank you very much for having us here this evening. We're pleased to be here to share our interim report on Chatham-Kent's core services base budget efficiency review. As Gord mentioned, and as most of you are aware, KPMG was engaged by the municipality to perform a service delivery review. And at this point in time, we've summarized our progress from the stakeholder engagement and quantitative analysis phases of the project in this interim report, which is really for your informational purposes. And Suk, if I can get you just to move to slide 6, and I'll move on from there. We're now in the process of using the information that we've gathered to date to help inform the opportunities that we will bring forward. And we're currently working through those with management, and those will form part of our next report to council. Just as a brief reminder, the objective of this engagement is to conduct an inclusive, collaborative, and detailed review of current service delivery models with members of senior management and staff, and to develop opportunities for the municipality to undertake changes that are in line with the strategic priorities of mayor and council. One quick reminder that I did want to provide is that this type of review does not constitute an audit or a deep dive staffing or operational review. It's broader in nature than that. If you can move the slide forward, please, Suk. In terms of the phase of the project, so we did kick this off several months ago now, and we've completed the first 6 phases of the project. We're now working through the last phase, which is to develop and prioritize opportunities and pull them into a final report and presentation for you. There were a number of out-of-scope service areas that were provided by the municipality in the request for proposal that was issued for this project. So just wanted to touch on those briefly as a reminder that these services were not included in our stakeholder interviews, current state assessment, or the analysis of opportunities or recommendations at the direction of the municipality. And Suk will walk through some of the highlights of our findings.
Thank you, Katie, for that introduction. Hello, everybody. I will just spend a couple minutes running through our approach and some of the themes we were identifying from the work we've done to date. And there's, as we look ahead, we'll be turning some of these themes into opportunities for the municipality. The initial phase of our work relied a lot on engaging with stakeholders. As Katie mentioned, we wanted to get everyone's views to better understand the organizational structures, the roles and responsibilities for the services that the municipality provides and the processes that each department carries out. And this is a representative list of the stakeholders that we engaged with. As you can see on the slide, it's a fairly comprehensive group of individuals and departments that we engaged with. As part of this, we've sort of taken the opportunity to theme our discussions into 6 areas that broadly group into governance and strategy, service standards, process and delivery models, data and technology, equipment and infrastructure, and people. And these opportunities help us group and understand common themes across the various stakeholder groups and departments. This slide does provide a snapshot of the information we were able to gather through our stakeholder consultation. And you know, the top left here under governance and strategy, we understood that there is a clear understanding of strategy and the vision for the municipality. However, the governance structures can create a divide between urban and rural communities. In terms of service standards, the stakeholders indicated that most of the services are being delivered at an appropriate level. However, there's a challenge in terms of meeting the needs of the communities in all of the geographical areas. In terms of process and service delivery, staff experienced and expressed their constraints in terms of capacity and the impacts that had on decision-making and communication processes. We also considered data and technology, and we'll be looking for opportunities to help the municipality further digitize their operations for greater efficiencies there. As it relates to equipment and infrastructure, we noted that the municipality has a large portfolio of assets, which is operating behind its needs from a future life cycle perspective. And as well, people are very committed and looking to deliver services in a more efficient and effective way. And there was a lot of support in achieving that objective. We also conducted an employee survey, which went out to all staff in the municipality. And on this slide, we took the opportunity to summarize the key points, some of which I'll highlight here today. And so the first one being the pandemic had really sort of heightened the need to accelerate the move towards online services and delivering services virtually. The municipality has a goal to invest in its employees, and capacity, however, is a continued limitation across all departments. I mentioned this earlier, but the climate, in addition to asset and infrastructure needs, the municipality appears to be behind on some of its climate change adaptation plans. And there's process improvement opportunities in regards to IT and platforms that can be used and leveraged more to their full potential to reduce the extent of manual processes and workarounds. So we'll be looking at these opportunities and themes in order to group and think about the business case for change and the business case for where council and the municipality should prioritize its efforts. We did also engage with the community, and I'll just summarize quickly. We had three main mechanisms for engaging with the community. We held specific ward meetings or community meetings in each of the 6 wards where community members could enroll and register and talk to us. We conducted a short survey on Let's Talk to CK, and we received email feedback directly from residents and the community to help us understand their concerns. So we really value this type of engagement and feedback. And on the next few slides, we do summarize some of the key themes here in terms of what was voiced to KPMG. A number of them shouldn't be surprises, but wanted to point a few out. Rural communities did voice the importance of having service centers and access to municipal services and resources. There was some areas of concern with respect to municipalities' plans around divestiture of bridges and culverts, and some other areas were well regarded, such as winter control, tourism, recreation, and library services. So very good feedback from the community, as well as from emails directly to KPMG, which is a mechanism to enable safe and transparent communication to our team. We heard that there is the need for better infrastructure and facility maintenance in some of the smaller towns. And in some cases, there is a difference or in service levels in some neighborhoods around waste and leaf collection and other services. So I'll pass it back to Katie, who will take us through the benchmarking analysis.
Great, thank you, Suk. So the other portion of work that we've completed is the quantitative assessment, which includes benchmarking the municipality's financial performance against 4 comparator municipalities. One thing to note is that it's difficult to find exact comparators for any municipality. So you kind of have to choose what works best for any given municipality. These ones were chosen based on their similar sizes, geographies, or based on the maturity of their operations compared to Chatham-Kent's, where management felt that they would be good ones to look towards. Our benchmarking was done largely using 2019 FIR data for each municipality because 2020 data was not fully available, but also 2020 is largely being considered an anomalous year due to the pandemic. So we looked back to 2019 as being a more regular year. Benchmarking analysis like this helps us identify useful opportunities to change how the municipality structure is aligned to deliver municipal services, can point out or highlight insights into operating efficiencies or processes, but it does also contain some risks as it assumes that the taxation and service levels in those other communities are right per se. And so when you do this benchmarking exercise, you do have to examine it through, I would say, a balanced and cautious lens, recognizing that there are benefits, but there are also risks associated with it. And as we've shown on the slide here, there are some general themes that came out of the benchmarking analysis. In general, Chatham-Kent's discretionary reserve balance has increased over the last 5 years, which has increased the flexibility to finance future capital projects or to address emergency situations when and if they arise. Staffing levels and mix are being strategically maintained. And when you look at headcount numbers, they show that Chatham-Kent is relatively lean in terms of pure headcount staffing compared to the benchmarked municipalities. Chatham-Kent uses both base and area rated tax systems to drive property tax revenue, and this has a direct and unique impact on how services are being delivered. And in general, services are being delivered at or below the average cost compared to the comparator group on a per household basis. So overall, Chatham-Kent delivers a high level of service given its resource capabilities to cover its large geographical area. And in terms of next steps, so this is sort of where we're at as far as the project goes. We're currently hosting working sessions with management to discuss and prioritize the opportunities that we've identified. And we'll be providing a list of those opportunities to Council on October 25th, followed by our final report on November 22nd. And that concludes our presentation. Happy to entertain any questions.
Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have, thank you, Katie and Suk, for your presentation. I have one observation and two questions that came to mind. On page 11 of your 160-page interim report, there is a reference there to the organizational structure, particularly with regard to the Community Human Services Department. And because of the size of this particular department and the portfolio there, I'm wondering why you didn't include employment and social services, childcare and early years, public health, housing, senior services, and long-term care. Despite the fact that they're out of scope for this particular review, all of the other out of scope programs and services that are listed on page 12 are actually listed on page 11. So when I was reading through, it was, to me, it was missing, that there were a number of things that should have been listed under that particular department that weren't. And I'm wondering whether you could comment on that. And then I have a couple of questions.
Sure. So in terms of the purpose of this slide, it was really meant to take each of the departments, and if you look to the appendices included in this report as well, as a means of sort of comparing organizational structures against the benchmarked comparators as well. I don't believe there was an intentional reason for not including those areas that you mentioned, but we did include all of the in-scope items in the Community Human Services section as well. We could have listed more. It wouldn't have impacted really any of our analysis.
All right. It's just such a large department, such a
Absolutely.
large portfolio that I thought it was interesting. First question has to do with the number of respondents from staff. Approximately 20% of the staff responded to the survey. And I'm wondering whether you thought that that was low, normal, high?
Overall, I believe we were pleased with the number of respondents and the engagement that we have from staff. Suk, please feel free to jump in if you were about to say something there.
Yeah, I was going to say that typically anything above 15% is a great sample size for our this type of analysis. And plus, we've also supplemented that type of feedback with direct interviews.
And given the fact that there were a number of services that were out of scope, is there any way to tell whether the employees of those out of scope departments participated in the survey as well?
They did. They did participate in the survey, and we did summarize their sentiments. But for the purposes of our scope, we relayed that feedback directly to the administration team. But it won't change the outcomes of our next report, which will have opportunities for the in-scope areas.
And those opportunities will be shared with staff before they come back to council, correct?
Yes.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Councillor Bondi, followed by Councillor Latimer.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Thank you very much for the report. One of the, I think, leading reasons that many in the public were asking for this type of analysis was staffing levels. And I did see in a slide just a couple of moments ago that you're satisfied that the staffing level at the municipality is, in your words, lean. So in layman's terms, we're not overstaffed. The concern is, as you would know, pre-amalgamation, there was a level of staffing. Post-amalgamation, the idea was, and again, amalgamation was kind of dropped on us by the province. It wasn't a municipal choice, well before my time. But many in the public and in the community have said, oh, gee, they're so staff heavy, they're so top heavy with administration. Not so much like, you know, the people doing the actual, road work, etc. But administration is, and we hear it all the time, and every councillor hears it. And I'd spoken to you guys in my interview about this. So just to reiterate that you're satisfied that our administrative staffing levels are fair, they're adequate, they're reasonable, and in your case, in your opinion, they're lean. So I would just like you to maybe touch on that one more time, because that's what we hear about. I don't hear, well, I only speak for myself, but I hear about service levels sometimes, but the general complaint is that there's way too many staff and we don't need all these people, blah, 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 blah. You know where I'm going with this, right? So, well, thanks for the chuckle, Karen. Thank you. But really, that is what we hear, and we all hear it. So if you could maybe expand on that, because it was just really about a one sentence in that slide that said staffing levels are lean and they're appropriate and adequate. So could you just expand on that? And maybe you can't, and if you can't, that's okay too. But that is really what we hear.
Yeah.
And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Absolutely. No problem. First, I'll start by just reiterating that this was not meant to be a deep dive into staffing levels, but we did perform a number of different analyses over the staffing levels, which are, they make up several pages of the 161 page report. So on an overall basis, looking at a pure headcount number, there were no red flags in terms of Chatham-Kent's staffing levels compared to the comparator municipalities. And then in the report, we've broken that down further in a variety of ways. There will certainly be some considerations as we develop our opportunities into staffing impacts and whether there are ways to gain efficiencies. But there was nothing in our overall staffing analysis that caused us to believe that there was a large issue in terms of staffing at Chatham-Kent.
Oh, and through you, Mayor Kenneth, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I'm only asking for a bit of a summary on that, as I don't think most people in the public are going to read the 160 pages, right? So, but maybe they will. Never underestimate people. You know, we got a pretty bright bunch here in Chatham-Kent, so you never know. But I do appreciate that, and that really was one of the bigger concerns that people came forward with when they're speaking to myself and to others. So that's a reassuring thing. And we've, in my 11 and a half years, that's been a big question all the time. And I'm sure somebody like Councillor Solomon, who goes back to, and Councillor Foss and et cetera, that goes back to amalgamation, that's always the question. It's really not so much, hey, do we have too many road guys out there? You know, it's more about the staffing levels. So thank you very much. That's an encouraging thing. And that's something that provides myself and other councillors with an answer when we receive that question one more time. So thank you again for your analysis and your report. Thank you.
Councillor Latimer.
Thank you, through the mayor. Katie, you said, I believe, that the comparator municipalities were provided to you by our municipality. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we worked with the project management team for the project to help identify and determine what the most appropriate comparative municipalities were to use.
Did you take that information and put it in your own matrix to assure yourselves and ourselves and the general public that those comparators were not given with a sense of, okay, these are the best ones to compare us to? Do you know what I'm saying? Because
absolutely,
like Councillor Bondi, we often hear, oh, sure, they pick and choose who they compare us to, and it all looks like it's roses for us. Yeah. So if you can speak to that, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely. It's a bit of an iterative process that we work through with the project management team. Certainly, if we had concerns over the comparator group that was provided to us, we would have pushed back and challenged on that. But from the process as we went through it, we felt that the comparators that were decided upon were appropriate for the use in this project.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for commenting on that, Katie. And thank you for the presentation to me.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. We'll move on to item 16, infrastructure and engineering services.
16A, strategy for sustainable public transit delivery.
And as this is an information report, we don't need anybody to move or second it, but Councillor Kirkwood-White and Councillor Latimer had a couple of questions. So Councillor Kirkwood-White, then to Councillor Latimer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I didn't have any questions, but I did want to compliment Ian and his team on the proposed fair product changes, actually, that will come before council just prior to budget time. Particularly, I like a lot of the recommendations or actions that have been taken and or are proposed, particularly with regard to the development of a process for the conventional service to permit a fare free support person for riders who require help with communication, mobility, personal care, medical needs, and or access to goods, services, or facilities. So very good report, and look forward to more changes in the future. Thank you, Ian.
Councillor Latimer.
I also did not have a question, but very much wanted to extend my sincere thanks to Anne-Marie Milson, Ian Clark, and Jared Denner for going above and beyond to respond to various ridership concerns over the past 2 months, especially regarding the new accessible buses. The transit team's efforts to educate, mitigate, and where necessary, modify recently implemented transit operation processes are appreciated and acknowledged by the Chatham-Kent Accessibility Advisory Committee. The Accessibility Advisory Committee are pleased with our transit team's efforts to expand on demand transit opportunities for both conventional and accessible service, and very pleased that there is planned provision for cost-effective, sustainable public transit that is universally accessible to as many residents as possible through our conventional service. And the Accessibility Advisory Committee also wants to acknowledge the transit team's understanding that there will always be a need for a responsive and efficient accessible transit service in our community that enables any individual, regardless of ability or need, the opportunity to access functional and safe transportation. So thank you so much, team, for listening to our ridership.
With that, we'll move on to item 17, community development.
17A, Natural Heritage Advisory Committee, terms of reference.
Councillor Latimer and Councillor Kirkwood White, can I get you to move this, please?
I have an amendment to this recommendation, and I know that I did send that ahead to Judy with Bruce, Gabriel, and Ryan's awareness and agreement with it.
It's on the screen now, Councillor Latimer.
Okay, so when I will say the terms of reference for the creation of a Natural Heritage Committee of the whole attached as this report. If I can get a seconder, I would like to speak to this.
Councillor Kirkwood White.
So seconded.
Thank you. When I read this report, I felt the outlined terms of reference and stated mandates of the committee were better suited to a Natural Heritage Committee of the whole versus an advisory committee. There's definitely a perception in our community that we've already completed this exercise. And that is the Natural Heritage Implementation Strategy was written, agreed upon with the Lower Thames Valley Conservation Area and other stewardship stakeholders and our agricultural partners doing what they were supposed to do. The stakeholder who didn't uphold their end of the bargain was the municipality, or rather the municipal system. So in response now, the way the recommendation was written, we want to rewrite the program and exclude the primary stakeholders. And that is our landowners, our agricultural partners, that in our own words are the primary pressure on the natural heritage features within CK. So it is evident that any effort to maintain or enhance natural heritage will need to be in cooperation with the agricultural community. So I think the terms of reference definitely spell out what council is tasked with, and that is receiving and reviewing the updated status of the NHIS strategy, including the outstanding tree canopy and the stewardship mapping data, reviewing and balancing our urban municipal tree and natural area development, and keeping in mind that we need to maintain our local farm landscapes as well, all of which will impact council's decision on to go forward or not with the implementation of a regulatory clear-cutting bylaw. I also agree that the mandate should include determination of a natural heritage systems plan as part of our provincial official plan update, and that this should include a recommendation for the establishment of a natural heritage advisory committee of council starting next council term in 2022, with roles and responsibilities identified with associated timelines and reporting structures that determines who does what when, with regard to tracking our natural heritage strategy objectives going forward, so we don't end up in the same place we are right now, 4 years plus. And I think I'll leave it at that for now.
We've got a number of speakers, Councillor Sakachi, followed by Councillor Pinsino.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I guess Councillor Latimer's amendment kind of addresses some of my concerns, but it seems to be a lot more detailed, what she just indicated, than what's on the currently up for voting. So Is it possible to get something? I'm not sure if it's possible to get an email sent exactly what was just said, because that seems like a very long amendment compared to what is currently on the screen right now.
Mr. Mayor, it's the clerk. I just would like to try to explain what the motion is and just verify with Councillor Latimer. My understanding is that Councillor Latimer is passing the motion that was on the report, the terms of reference as written. She just would like to see it called the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole rather than the Natural Heritage Advisory Committee. So that's really the only change. The terms of reference would be left as presented in the report.
Okay, so everything else, Madam Clerk, would be status quo in regards to the report. This is just actually altering the committee of a whole. That's all then.
It's just altering the title of the committee. Yes, that's my understanding also.
So would the other committee, would there still be the formation of another committee? So we have the opportunity to hear the stakeholders' conversations and opinions as well?
I'll pass that back over to the mayor to ask staff who wrote the report. Mayor Caniff, I'll pass that back over to Gabriel so he can answer the question as he wrote the report. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just looking to see who wrote the report. Thanks. Gabriel?
Mayor Caniff, it's Bruce McAllister, General Manager, Community Development. Maybe I can jump in here if you don't mind, and I'll rely on Gabriel if I need him to answer some questions here. But I think that the purpose here of the committee of the whole approach is so that council can sit as a committee, and then they can ask and direct us or administration as to what information you would like to see come forward, including how you would want to involve the public during that process as well. So at this point in time, it wasn't intended that there be another advisory committee established. I think the intent here would be that council work with this as a committee of the whole through the rest of its term. And one of the tasks would be to determine whether you want to move forward with a formal public advisory committee in the next term of council. I hope that answers the question.
Actually, Bruce, I don't think that you could have answered it more specifically to my concern. So that does at least capture the fact that we are going to still be able to take the concerns from the stakeholders and ensure that that those are being heard very loudly. So I appreciate the amendment, and I appreciate your response. That is it for me, Mayor Caniff.
Councillor Pinsino, followed by Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Worship. I'm all in favor of this. However, I'm not sure why this committee is all made up of council. That just, when we were bringing this forward some months ago, I was imagining something different. I thought we would have involved the agriculture community, the tree conservation group, Lower Thames, Sydenham Conservation, and groups like that. I just think that would have brought more to the table. And the benchmark we have now is exactly what Councillor Latimer had said earlier. There's a lot of distrust out there. My opinion, I just think we should have involved everybody in this, but that's all I've got.
You still can.
Bruce, did you want to comment?
Sorry, I think, thank you, Your Worship. Just further to that, I think that's what I was trying to get in my previous answer, that council can direct and bring in, members of administration, stakeholder groups, whatever you see fit in terms of, how you want, what information you would like to move forward and through the committee of the whole approach. Mm-hmm.
Do I still have the floor, Your Worship?
Certainly.
Okay, so through you to Bruce, the best way to send this back and have it come back, I think we should involve these groups, not all of council, say maybe 3 or 4 council members, whatever it is, maybe someone of your caliber on staff, or would that be the best way to do it, Bruce?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think the best way to move forward now is council make a decision tonight, whether, first of all, you accept and want to move forward with the committee of the whole. And then I think you need to have an initial committee of the whole meeting and then provide some direction as to what you would like to come forward in the future and how you want to structure that.
Okay.
You want to see, does that make sense? So,
Okay, I can work with that. Thank you.
thank you.
Councillor Hall, followed by Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, not really much to add. I think with Councillor Sakachi's and Councillor Pinsono's questions and Bruce's response, that answered all my questions. So thank you for that clarification, Bruce. And just wanted to thank Gabriel for the report as well and putting this all together. I believe this is the best way forward for this term of council to address this issue now and to really help set things up moving into the future. So thank you.
Councillor Thompson, followed by Councillor Kirkwood White.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to echo Councillor Sakachi's comments as well as say that I think in the short term that this is, and short term being the next 12 to 18 months, that is the best way to handle this situation. I think it gives us an opportunity to direct a little bit of the conversation, because when people feel left out of something, it creates a stigma. And we need, as humans, to feel part of a whole. And we need this to be a whole community initiative, this natural heritage process. So I think this is the best opportunity. This is kind of the way we do it through budget. And I think that gives us the opportunity to bring in people when we need to. And I do think we'll need to look at it again down the road. But for the foreseeable future, I think this is the best way forward. Thank you.
Councillor Kirkwood White.
Thank you, Your Worship. When I initially read the report, it sounded like we were setting up a committee that would report to itself. And can someone give me an indication of what other issues we have dealt with in committees of the whole in the past?
Mr. Mayor, it's Judy. I can try to take a stab at this one. Councillor Kirkwood White, so budget is a committee of the whole. Right. And you discuss, all of the budget, you have multiple nights, you come up with different recommendations, and ultimately at the end of the day, you come up with a recommendation that you refer back to council to approve. And so this would be very similar. You could hold many different meetings. You could have different deputations within that. You could have different presentations within that. And then at the end of the day, the committee would come out with a recommendation and refer that to council for final approval. So it's just kind of a more informal and focused way of discussing an item such as that.
And is there any indication of how many meetings we would have at this point?
I'll refer that back to Bruce.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I think at this point in time, I'd like to first take this back. I wanted to get some direction of council to see how often this committee would need to meet. I think that will, one of the takeaways as we reported back in August, I think is one of the immediate deliverables or pieces of presentation will be an update on the natural heritage mapping piece that the Conservation Authority is working on for us. So I'd like to find out exactly what the timing looks like on that, but I anticipate sometime in November. Maybe end of October, we'd have an initial meeting. We could very well do this. We could piggyback on other maybe council meeting nights. We could do it on maybe planning meeting nights, just so we're not solely scheduling too many more different meeting nights for council. So those are different options I'd like to look at. And I think going forward, it would probably be a matter of getting some direction from council to see how much further information or need you feel there is for additional meetings, whether it be once a month, twice a month, that type of thing, Councillor. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in and motion passes 17-1. Moving on to 17B, Ontario Heritage Act Designation Bylaw 30 Elwood Avenue, Community of Chatham City.
Councillor Kirkwood White and Councillor Crew, can I get you to move this, please?
So moved.
Second.
Councillor Kirkwood White, you had a question.
Just a comment. I wanted to express my congratulations to Susan Simpson and her family for their persistence and their patience in securing the heritage designation for their beautiful home. Congratulations. It's been a long wait, Susan, and happy to see this come to fruition.
Seeing no other question. Oh, Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mary Caniff. Sorry, I guess can you hear me? I'm unmuted.
Yes, we can hear you, Councillor Bondi.
Okay, great. Thank you, Judy. And again, thank you, Mary Caniff. I'm very pleased to be in favor of this. As my mother lived in that house for 50 years. I don't think there's a conflict because she does not live there anymore. I grew up in the home from the day I was born until I was 40. Well, I did leave home at one point. So it's a great thing. I know it's been a long road for Miss Simpson. She's done an incredible job. She offered my family the opportunity to tour the home a couple of years ago after she had brought it back to, we thought it was perfect when my mother sold it, but she brought it back to effectively like a 1923-24 state, which is when the home was built. It's on a great little avenue. She's done a wonderful job, and I'm very pleased that Susan is stuck with this, because I think this has been going on for a couple of years, that she's been pursuing this heritage designation, which, and again, I live in a heritage home and a heritage designated home. And, the limitations for all the people listening out there they're nothing really. Having a heritage designation is just a great thing. It doesn't limit you in what you can and cannot do. What it does do, and what it's done for myself and for Ms. Simpson, is it gives you the impetus to preserve it as a heritage home and to recognize, the home that you live in, that it does have a history, and you may want to retain that. And Susan's done an incredible job in maintaining, and actually not maintaining. Susan has brought back the heritage element to that home. And again, a beautiful home. And for me, a ton of great family memories over the course of almost 50 years. So I'm very pleased that this is happening finally for Ms. Simpson. And as some of us would know, some of us that have sat on the Heritage Committee over the years, there's kind of a draw for people to apply for this, because we don't have a lot of heritage homes in Chatham-Kent, and the Heritage Committee is looking for people that have, and there's certainly enough of them. Like, we live in obviously a very old community. So for somebody like Susan to come forward and ask for the designation and come through with all the appropriate renovations and the history of the home, I think it's a great thing that we as council, I hope, are going to approve this designation. And I know that Ms. Simpson will do a great job with it, and she'll continue to offer this home as a great example of what can be done to a nice, beautiful old home in a great old part of our city. So thank you again, Mayor Kenneth.
With that, seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18 to 0. Moving on to 17D, motion by Councillor Sakachi regarding property standards backlog.
Councillor Sakachi and Councillor Latimer, can I get you? Well, Councillor Sakachi, over to you, and then I was going to get Councillor Latimer to second it.
Sure. Madam Clerk, would you like me to read through the whole motion, or just what's on the screen?
Just what's on the screen is fine.
Sure. That administration provide a report to council that includes the following: identify creative approaches to fulfill the backlog and property standard issues, investigate funding avenues and the cost and feasibility to hire additional building inspectors / bylaw enforcement officers, both temporary and permanent options.
Councillor Latimer, will you second that?
So seconded.
Okay, Councillor Sakachi.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Obviously, we all know as council, when it comes to budget times and talking about, positions as coincides with the current KPMG study that's going on, is that, this is something that we have to really proceed with caution on and be diligent. So my request to council is to, ask for a report to look at our building department specifically. I think that we have to recognize, as a council, that right now we are seeing some extremely challenging times, some from positive aspects in regards to the current building aspects, and the development. And then additionally, the challenges that we're also facing with the pandemic and now with the, emergency situations in Wheatley. The reason why I'm bringing this forward is I've received a significant amount of concerns from the public in regards to the ability of our bylaw enforcement officers to get out to properties and look into property standards. That is kind of identified in the KPMG report, which coincides this motion, that was not planned, stating that they're only attending for life-threatening matters at this time. So I'm not sure if Mr. Lucina is on by chance right now.
Thank you, Mary Caniff. Yes, I am. Okay.
Mr. Lucina, I know this is probably putting you on the spot a little bit, but is there any type of kind of rough estimate on how far we are behind from, addressing those concerns from a property standards aspect?
Well, again, thank you, Mary Caniff. I can tell you that so far this year, we've had 541 investigations into bylaw. In addition to those, since we put a hiatus on bylaw enforcement for non-life threatening or safety issues, we've logged 131 new issues. So in addition to that, we have not been, of the 541 issues that we've not been doing any further investigation on that. And additionally, we still have 374 bylaw enforcement issues from last year that we've put a hold on. So we have a fair number of bylaw complaints to be working on. This is the main reason that we're not following through on the bylaw enforcement, is that building permits, which we've surpassed the volumes from last year. Again, we're over our numbers from last year. We have approximately 150 permit applications that we still haven't even looked at. Some are waiting for approval, some we just haven't had time to review. We've had staff working weekends and evenings to try and get ahead of the backlog. And what's happening is that from a building code perspective, is we're unable to meet the legislative timeframes set out in the building code for issuing the building permits and performing inspections. And that is why we've done the hiatus on non-life threatening bylaw enforcement issues. So over the past number of months, I've been reviewing our backlog with building permits and inspections. And I had hoped that come October, we'd be able to, start back trying to get rid of the backlog in bylaw enforcement. But unfortunately, or fortunately, as you would think, development is strong, and it doesn't show that it's slowing down. So not to get the crystal ball out here, but I don't see us getting back to full bylaw anytime soon, perhaps in November. That would be my best estimate.
Thank you, Mr. Lucina. I do have a couple of follow-up questions for you, but I don't want to, additionally, I don't want to put Mayor Caniff on the spot here, but Mayor Caniff, if it's possible, I'd just like to ask you a direct question as well.
Certainly.
So I know with the pandemic, it's been a little bit more challenging for council as a whole to kind of go out and meet with, the planning department and different builders in our area and developers, with the pandemic and their restrictions. So, and I do know that you've been on, the ground. I just wanted to touch base on your opinion, if you feel that, our growth strategy is going to continue strong. I know that we're seeing amazing rapport with our CIP for the apartments, and it's just a wonderful thing to see them going up in our community. And I just wanted to see if you're able to comment, in working with Stuart's team, as well as, the different development aspects, to see if you anticipate us still going strong in the near future.
Thanks, Councillor Scotchy. I would fully expect our growth to continue. I know in talking with a number of developers, et cetera, they're looking at bigger years next year. And compared to, this has been our biggest year since the history of Chatham-Kent. And I expect it to continue going on the macroeconomics of our growth point towards is going to be its next several years. So I would really look forward to seeing a report that would put some more resources towards this, because if it was just another couple months, I'm not sure we'd have to deal with it as much. But given that I expect it to be for a longer period of time, that I look forward to administration putting a report forward to put some more resources towards it.
Thank you, Mayor Kaniff. And my last couple of comments will be, Mr. Lucina, I just want to be very clear in stating this, is that this request and report is by no means any slight towards, the staffing department. I know that you guys have really been up against it with the current developments, which is a wonderful thing, as well as all the other, different directives that have been put in place. So I just wanted to ensure you that I understand that the challenges you are facing. But as a counselor, it is very challenging when people are calling in regards to concerns from May that have not been addressed and haven't even, aren't about to be addressed. It's very challenging for me to say, well, from a staffing perspective, it might be months still that, before we are even able to review your item. So I just want to stress that, so there's not a lot of heavy conversation, that this is just a report. And I think for us as a community to ensure that we're providing everybody in our community with a good service level, as well as the people that are investing into our community, to ensure that they have proper and adequate service. I think this does not harm any of that by just looking at the report and seeing the kind of the costs associated with potentially addressing some of the shortfalls that we're seeing from all these things as discussed. Last question, Mr. Lucina, if there's nothing, if we do nothing, if the report is just kind of standardized and we do nothing, do you feel that your department is sustainable currently with this growth trajectory, as well as the needs for your department, if we just leave it as status quo? And how long would it take you to catch up?
Thank you, Mary Caniff. If the volume of work maintains our current status, I suspect that I'm going to have staff burnout. I know there's other departments that are experiencing that, and that is typical across most of the province. Many chief building officials have this concern that there's only so many hours in a day. There has to be downtime for staff, or they'll burn out. I'm not quite sure how long it would take to get out of the backlog, but it certainly wouldn't be months. It would be longer than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lucina. And Mayor Caniff, I just want to say, it's a very important as council that we look at this. I feel, in my personal opinion, just because we want to ensure that when people are having a concern about what's going on in their neighborhood, that we are able to identify and address it in a feasible manner. And I think at this point, I think that we are not, and I look forward to everyone supporting this report moving forward. Thank you.
Before I go on other speakers, maybe Bruce, do you have any other comments to add to Mr. Lucina's?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. No, certainly I'd echo, what Paul's comments there, and thank you, Councillor Sakachi, for bringing the motion forward. So Paul and I have discussed this over the last several months. We'd actually started an internal service review on building, and then the motion came forward with regard to the KPMG study. So we've been kind of following parallel, and Councillor Sakachi kind of hit on it earlier. There was a note in there about this issue. And it'll probably be coming forward, in their next stages of report as well, along with, the uptake in development. I'll tell council, even 2 years ago, if you recall, when we first brought the growth forecast to you, back before the actual growth strategy was formally launched in early 2020, even the consultants we hired at the time and ourselves didn't project this type of growth pace at the time. We've just had those discussions here in the last month, and all in agreement that we need to actually revisit those growth forecasts based on what we're seeing in terms of permit activity on the ground here in Chatham-Kent, but also the Ministry of Finance just recently released updated projections this summer, which are much higher than they were, not just in Chatham-Kent, but in Southwest Ontario in general. I think obviously some of that is related to the pandemic, for various different reasons that we don't need to get into here tonight. But we are going to review that, and I think it will give council better perspective, probably in November, where we're at in terms of revised growth forecasts. how that's going to impact the growth strategy in general, maybe not just necessarily in Paul's department, but it's also impacting until you're even on the planning team as well, right? We've back several years ago when we first brought the report, we were, frankly, we were in a recession state, right, at that time, and we were dealing with, I'm going to say like a quarter of the building permits or planning applications that we are, as we currently are experiencing, and even the complexity of the applications now are significantly different than they were even 5 years ago. So I'll just leave that with council for consideration as well. I think it's certainly something that needs to be further review and discussion. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, I'll go to the seconder, Councillor Latimer, and then Councillor Thompson.
Thank you to the mayor. I have two questions for Mr. Lucina. One is, do we have any access to those 100 new building inspectors that were announced today through Minister McNaughton's office?
Thank you, Mary Caniff. I'm not sure that those are building inspectors as per the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. I didn't listen too closely to the announcement, but I believe they are for the Ministry of Labor, I thought. But again, building inspectors need to be qualified through the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing.
I can clarify that, Your Worship.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. Sorry, Your Worship, it is Bruce. They were additional Ministry of Labor inspectors to help businesses with COVID enforcement and COVID recovery and protocols. So that's what they were.
Thank you, Bruce, for that clarification. Is there any access to COVID funds? Maybe that's not a question for Mr. Lucina. I'll save that one. What about, I'm feeling like this report may be another stress on your department, Mr. Lucina. Now you say you have your internal review and you're doing the KPMG action plan. Could this be part and parcel of it, or do you feel this? Are you feeling you can provide this report back to council without more undue stress, and could possibly a report across departments might help you? I don't know, like directive or customer service.
Thank you, Councillor Latimer. I believe that we do, as you know, all departments have different other factors that take their time up from their regular office duties. But I believe that I have enough background from past reports and service reviews that I could, with the help of Mr. McAllister, to prepare this report for council.
Wonderful. I'll look forward to reading all about those creative approaches. One last question for, if I can, for I think maybe Gord or Matt, then is there any COVID money that could assist with this with regard to the bylaw enforcement officer more than being hired to help Mr. Lucina's department manage those non-threatening or even COVID associated infringements they have to check out?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. It's Gord Quinton, Chief Financial Officer speaking. I would encourage, Paul just mentioned that that report can come, and I think that report will detail the financials of where, ideas of where the money can come from without, perhaps without too much of an impact on taxpayers. So I would suggest let's just wait for the report, and I'll be consulted with that when Paul writes it.
Thank you, Gord.
Councillor Thompson, did you have your questions answered?
No, but my computer went a little glitchy there, so I still have my questions.
Okay, so it's I'll point to you, and then we'll go to Councillor Crew.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize, like I said, if these have already been asked. I glitched out there for a minute. I probably logged in twice. The KPMG update, as well as I thought I heard Bruce say you're already working on it. So does that make this report somewhat redundant?
Thank you, Worship. If you didn't catch all that, Councillor Thompson, what I said was, yeah, we in terms of looking at the, I guess the building services department in general, we were, talking about that a few months ago. And then, council directed the KPMG study. I appreciate it's maybe a little higher level, but we thought we'd wait to see what, came out of that. What may very well come out of that is that, we prepare a report that's basically what you're asking for tonight, frankly, if I could say it any simpler, that we investigate, how to resource, the building department. Maybe we look at the approach that's, currently taken in the building department, where we currently use the model that was, I don't know if Paul reiterated this, but currently both our staff serve both as building enforcement officers and building inspectors, correct? Rather than just bylaw enforcement versus building inspectors. And that was kind of a change done several years ago. It's something else that maybe we need to revisit again. But again, I think that's a detail that we should come back to council with in a more holistic report.
It appears Councillor Thompson's frozen again. With that, I'll go on to Councillor Crew, and then
How long do
Councillor
you think this report would take?
Oh, sorry, Councillor Thompson, you froze there for a while. Go ahead, Bruce.
Bruce, did
See,
you
that's
want
what
to?
I think too many people are using the Wi-Fi.
sorry, Councilor Mayor, because I didn't catch that question, the last question.
He asked, how long is the report going to
Sorry,
take?
I'm working on it here. The question is how long would the report take?
Sorry, Paul, did you want to?
Sure, Bruce, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mary Caniff. I would suspect that we could get this report out sometime in November, early November.
Okay, I'm going to work on the theory. You can still hear me. I guess my question is how long has this backlog or a backlog existed? I remember talking about this 2, 4, 6, 8 years ago. It's always been an issue dealing with property standards, has it not?
Thank you, Mary Caniff. Yes, we have always, we've always seemed to have a backlog in bylaw enforcement. And as I've said over the years, to rectify a bylaw complaint, to get it into compliance, is different than, say, a building permit. A building permit, you issue the permit, you do the inspections, and you close it. Bylaw enforcement is a different animal. Sometimes you can have something resolved in a couple of weeks. Sometimes they take a couple of months. Oftentimes they're reoccurring over the years. And, if you look at as an example, excuse me, the old Dover Hotel in Pancor, we've been working on that for probably 6 to 7 years until it got to the point that we could actually demolish it. Yes, there always seems to be a backlog in bylaw enforcement, but I believe it's just the nature of the beast, so to say. Thank you.
So do I. And when you said it was an animal, I was going to say it was a beast as well. In years past, had you not come to council, specifically at budget time, asking for more resources in the department?
Yes, Councillor Thompson, and we've changed the model of how we've done bylaw enforcement. Years ago, when I, prior to me becoming the chief building official, we had the same model as we have now, dual roles. Then after Bill 124 came in, and there's the added pressures to get building permits out. We then had a standalone bylaw enforcement team. We had it as a contract, but we found over the years that it didn't work as well as when we were dual roles. So yes, we've come back to council a number of times, asking for more staff, and because it's a dual role, that the costs of the staff, because they're dual role, is subsidized by the building permit revenue. I think Gord was edging to that when we were talking about doing the report and the costs. So even though the bylaw enforcement role and the backlog is large, so to speak, lots of investigations to do, the costing for that position is largely paid for by building permits, if that helps.
Right, but ultimately, if I'm hearing you and Gord correctly, ultimately the funding avenues are going to be municipal in one sort or another.
Yes, I would agree to that point, and Gord would be able to explain that the financial end of it better than me. Thank you.
That's fair. That's good enough. Sorry, I don't know if I'm frozen or not. I'm going to assume I'm not. Just one final question. With this coming back in November, ultimately, would it fall to the budget to decide if we were going to increase the staffing levels, or how would that work?
Gord, can I get you to answer that question?
Sorry. Yeah, thank you, Mayor Caniff. Seems odd we're debating the details of the report that was asked for before you see the report. So everything that's been asked in the last 10 minutes are answers that would be detailed in the report that's been recommended by the motion to come.
That's fair.
If that's fair.
That's fair. I guess I'm just looking ahead.
So looking ahead, but if you want to answer, that seems like hopefully long term, but for now, let's call it a temporary issue. We haven't, in the 20 plus years of Chatham-Kent, we've had the highest growth in the last 18 months than we've ever had. Hopefully that continues for years to come, but we usually don't react with permanent full-time staffing until we have a demonstrated longer term issue. So the recommendations of the report may include some, and I have not talked about the details to Paul, but whether it's 1 year funding, 2 years funding to get us over a hump and see where we're at before we make permanent decisions.
But so
it could be reserves funding, it could be a combination of the building department reserve. It depends on the final details of what Paul and Bruce recommend.
So just to clarify, Gord, in your report, you're going to talk about where the funds are going to come if you're looking for additional funds, whether it's from reserve, whether it's from permit fees, whether it's the budget.
That's correct. And if it's if it is if it was a permanent staff recommendation, it likely would be something that, council could approve it right away too, but it would be more likely to be something referred to budget. If it's a temporary staffing situation, it's more likely that council could approve it right away to be funded from a reserve.
Okay. Anything else, Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, just one final comment. I am going to support it. I share Councillor Sakachi's concerns and frustrations. Been living it for quite a few years. I would just temper my expectations, though. I don't expect to see so much in the way of creative approaches. I think if there was a creative approach or something that was low-hanging fruit, we would have already done it. I expect that the answer is what we know it's going to be, throwing more people at it. So I look forward to the conversation, and I'm looking forward to getting a report back. Thank you.
Councillor Crew, your last speaker.
Thank you. I don't have much to say now because of the previous speakers, but I am going to support Councillor Sakachi's motion. I think that it's long overdue, and thank you for bringing it. One thing I haven't really heard people talk about is the impact that this has on the citizens, because when the complaints that we get are the property standard complaints that are taking a back burner. Like I know that the mayor's seen a few today and yesterday from a citizen, but it impacts their lives and their peace and harmony in their neighborhoods and wherever they live. So this really needs to be funded properly. I hope that it comes back, and I agree, Paul. As long as I've been here, property standards has always had a backlog, but it's never been this long. So I look forward to the report, and I fully support anything that comes back and being creative, whether it's temporary or what, but we need to make sure we address this shortfall.
All right, thanks. Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in and motion passes 17-1. Moving on to 17E, rezoning to protect woodlot features at no cost.
Councillor Latimer, and then I'll get Councillor Wright to second it. So Councillor Latimer, do you want to go through your motion?
Sure, I'll read that motion that interested landowners that wish to voluntarily have their woodlot features rezoned for long-term clear cutting protection may do so at no cost by contacting Chatham-Kent Planning Services. And if you get your, if I can get a seconder, I would like to speak to this.
Councillor Wright, will you second this?
Yes, I'll second that. Thank you.
Councillor Latimer, floor is yours.
Thank you. By no means do I feel this action is the end all or be all answer to the woodlot controversy or issue in our community, but I do think it will be interesting to see the uptick and for us to realize if there are any landowners out there that want to place a protection order on their woodlot at no cost, while still retaining or their full ownership of their property rights. I think it'd be interesting for us to know whether or not there's anybody out there who wants to do this. And it's information that we could use as the Natural Heritage Committee of a whole while we are deliberating and reviewing and coming up with recommendations based on information we have. It's a piece of information that I would like to have because I have had several farmers and landowners call me throughout this process that said exactly that. Claire, I need that bylaw because I don't want to see all my years of hard work and money I put into my woodlot only to be for naught when I sell to an owner, a new purchaser that promises to take care of my woodlot and then doesn't. So this is a way to do this for the landowners without going through the cost of rezoning to an open space or conservation or using a land trust. While the land trust does give them back their monies that they put out, all three of those options involve a landowner giving up a certain amount of rights for their property, and this does not. This enables a landowner to put that protection on their woodlot. They still have the freedom to manage that land, to square up their properties, harvest their wood, clean up the woodlot for family or community use at their will. And within reason, most of us know it isn't our local landowners that are the issue. It are those people who come in and purchase our land, or purchase the local landowners and then clear cut for pure profit. So this is a way for us to get information and to see whether or not we have any interest at all in this community for this action. I'll leave it at that for now.
All right, I'll go to Councillor Hall, then Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I think given the fact that we just approved a report to create a committee of the whole for natural heritage, and given the fact that I believe this concept that Councillor Latimer has brought forward, it definitely warrants further discussion and comment not only from staff but the community, I move to defer this motion to the Natural Heritage Committee of the whole for further discussion. Thank you.
Can I get a seconder for that? I see there's a bunch of hands there.
I'm happy to second.
All right, so Councillor C. McGregor. Councillor Seaman-Grayer seconded. Okay, so if I could direct questions to the deferral of this motion, we refer to the Natural Heritage Committee of the whole. So these are all questions related to that. So I'll stick with Councillor Solomon, then Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to ask a question with respect to the line that says at no cost, but even if it's referred to the Natural Heritage Committee of the whole, I'd still like that question answered, because I have no idea what no cost means and no cost to whom. Several years ago, the planning department had a policy that the cost of the department and the applications for consents under the Planning Act were going to be paid for out of the by the applicants, and we weren't in such a period of time of great growth. I'm trying to think of a nice way to put it. Growth was rather sluggish, and there weren't enough applications coming in. And lo and behold, we got a report back that said that the fees were going to go up in order to meet the policy. My fear is, of course, when it says no cost, I mean no cost to anyone, not just the landowner who happens to make this application. My fear is that if we do these at no cost to the landowner, there's still a cost to the department. And I don't want to see that cost passed on to the person who's looking for a severance or a correction of title or a lot addition in who are not landowners who would benefit from this policy. So if Councillor Hall's motion passes, I want that addressed, and I want somebody to tell me that they're going to address that if that occurs in the report.
Can I get someone from administration to confirm that that will be looked at? Don? Don, you're on mute.
Thank you. 2 mute buttons there. Apologies. Given that we're going to a committee of the whole, Councillor Solomon will be present, and I'm sure that that can be raised and built into the work that's going to be done by the group. But that will certainly be within the spirit of all of the work that has to be undertaken. So I think we can make the commitment to review that issue.
Well, Your Worship, thank you, and thank you through you to Mr. Shropshire. And if it doesn't pass, I'd still like to know what no cost means, because this ought not be. My fear is that other people are going to subsidize this if someone doesn't confirm that rates, fees for applications that our planning department does won't be boosted up as a result of increased expense to the planning department from this motion.
So Councillor Solomon, if this does not pass and we go back to the original motion, I will come back to you and you can ask that question. It can be addressed. Great.
You can tell, Your Worship, that what I'm trying to do is make sure this is not a hidden subsidy of some kind. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. And just remind everybody that this is any hands up refer to the motion to refer. So Councillor Wright, I noticed you dropped your hand. So I assume you're good with that. Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. My question is really about the motion, but I don't know that I can vote on a referral of the motion if I don't understand the motion. So if it's okay, and I'll leave that to your discretion. The motion, would that allow for the next owner of said bush lot, wood lot, would they be locked into this agreement that they wouldn't have the ability to clear cut it or do whatever they want with it? You know, that's what I'm not really clear about. And again, I know my question isn't necessarily about the referral, but without understanding the motion in clarity, I can't vote on a referral.
Yeah, so we'll have someone explain to you, Councillor Bondi. Bruce, can you explain just what would happen there? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Maybe without considering the motions on the floor, all the nuances of this, but if somebody rezones their property, that is subsequent to a public process, and it's subject to council approval. Somebody could request to change the zoning of their property in the future, which again would be subject to council approval in a public process. I hope that answers the question, but what I'm saying there is there's always the opportunity to potentially change the zoning to something else in the future.
And through you, Mayor Kenneth, thank you, Bruce. So the rezoning would be a done deal, and the next owner of the property would have to apply for rezoning, which we've gone through 1,000 times. And that would be basically the process that we've seen many, many times before.
That's correct.
Okay, great. That clears it up. Thank you very much.
Okay, I see no other hands regarding this motion, so we'll put this to vote. And so we're voting on that the motion be referred to the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole.
Waiting for one more, council, please. Still waiting. Okay, all votes are in. Motion passes 14-3.
With that, we'll move on to item 18, corporate services.
18A, motion by Councillor Foss regarding vaccination policy for councillors, committees of council, and local boards.
Councillor Foss, I'll go to you, and then I'll have Councillor B. McGregor second it.
Okay, I'll so move it.
Did you want to read your motion, please?
Okay, sure. Vaccination policy for members of council and committee members. Whereas the safety of staff and public is of paramount importance, and whereas vaccinations prove an additional layer of protection against COVID-19 and have been demonstrated to be effective in preventing serious illness and reducing transmission and hospitalization. And whereas provincial data has confirmed that the COVID-19 Delta variant is fueling a fourth wave of infection. And whereas Chatham-Kent has been a leader in the COVID-19 response and vaccination rollout. And whereas numerous other municipalities, institutions, and public sector organizations have or are in the process of implementing a COVID-19 vaccination policy for employees. And whereas the municipality of Chatham-Kent is developing a COVID-19 vaccination policy for all employees. Therefore, council direct administration to prepare a draft COVID-19 vaccination policy that would apply to members of council and return it to council by October the 4th council meeting. Council approved that citizen volunteers appointed to advisory committees and local boards be notified that those volunteers must provide proof of full vaccination or medical exemption prior to resumption of in-person meetings or in order to take their seats at those meetings. So moved.
Councillor B. McGregor, can I get you to second that?
I'll second that.
Councillor Foss, you have the floor now.
Okay, I think the motion is fairly self-explanatory. I know that we've been encouraging all citizens of Chatham-Kent to be vaccinated. We're encouraging employers to vaccinate their employees. And I feel that it is our part to set an example, to lead by example, I guess, that we're willing to do that so that we can encourage others to do it. Thank you.
Councillor B. McGregor, did you want to add anything before I move on the several speakers?
No, you can move on to the other speakers.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, Councillor Pinsino, followed by Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Worship. Before I start, I want to give full disclosure here. I am fully vaccinated. To be honest, I didn't appreciate the local press's headline stating that all but 3 counselors are vaccinated. It's a little bit misleading, and frankly, I don't believe it was any of their business. However, I'm a first responder on the Thamesville Fire Department, and part of my job is to assist with medicals with EMS. And I made the choice to vaccinate as soon as it was available. And I believe that was the right choice. However, at the end of the day, it was my choice to do it. I can't support forcing anybody to get vaccinated who believes it's not right for them. Doing this, I think you're going to lose a lot of good committee members. I think you're going to see, and let's face it, they're volunteers. It's, in my opinion, this should remain a choice. And that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Solomon, followed by Councillor Sakachi.
Thank you, Worship. Really, I have a couple questions on this, and I'll let you direct whoever answers them from staff. I'd like to know first, how many persons approximately would fall into the category that this motion seeks to address? I mean, we know 18 of them, but the next group is the citizen volunteers to advisory committees. Your Worship?
Yeah, I'm just, I'm waiting for
Sorry.
somebody to step up myself.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. It's Kathy Hoffman, General Manager of Corporate Services. We don't know the precise number yet, Councillor Solomon, but probably somewhere between 50 to 75.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. Thank you, Ms. Hoffman.
You're welcome.
My second question is, how many employees are there of the municipality when we take into account the police services and the PUC? And of course, that would include library and health. Would that be closer to 2,000?
Mr. Chair, yes, it would be over 2,000.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hoffman. So this is, if this motion passes, this policy comes back on October 4th with respect to that 50 to 75 people. On that same date, we'll be getting a report back with respect to the 2,000 people.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council has not asked for a report on the status of the municipal policy, but certainly that's something that we can also provide information on. It will be helpful for us as we go through our implementation. It would be my preference to come back to you when we actually have some statistics to share with you once we start having staff disclose their vaccination status to us. It would be helpful. I would be able to provide some stats that might be more meaningful to council at that time, but certainly I'm at your disposal on that, Council.
Your Worship, my comment is I wanted to support the motion, but I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to deal with 50 people to 75 people when there's 2,000 that I don't know whether we're going to have a policy in place by October 4th. I don't know, do I have to bring a motion to amend the motion so that we have that other policy to add a paragraph 3 to have the administration bring forward on October 4th council meeting the policy with respect to the other approximately 2,000 municipal employees? So that's an amendment to the motion, if I get a second.
Ms. Hoffman, any thoughts on that?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification, Councillor Solomon, are you simply asking for the update of the administrative policy at that time, or were you actually making a motion about dealing or something else about that? We had spoken about this at our last council meeting, and at that point in time, council had not elected to approve the administrative policy and that we were to proceed with the implementation of ours, which we have done. We've already rolled that out on Friday. And it is consistent timing, close to the timing of this particular policy that council would be taking a look at. So just want to make sure that we're clear on what you're asking.
I'm asking that you bring forward the policy on October 4th so the public knows what policy is to be used with respect to the vast majority, I mean, the 2,000 people, approximately 2,000 employees. I
Yes,
don't think the
okay,
public
yep.
knows that.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Councillor Solomon. I understand what your ask is, and we have also been preparing media release to share with the public what our policy is going to be containing as well. We've just rolled it out to our employee group late last week, and we've been giving them a chance to review it and understand it and ask questions before implementation, and happy to share the content of that as well.
Well, I brought it as an amendment to the motion. I hope to get a seconder.
Okay, so Councillor Foss and Councillor B. McGregor, are you okay with adding that number 3 to just providing an information report of what the policy is within the municipality?
I'm okay with that.
I'm good with that.
All right, so we'll add a number 3. Is that, Councillor Solomon, does that meet with your requirement just to provide an information report?
Thank you, Your Worship. Having been a deemed an essential worker since last March 2020, it's interesting to see where we've gone and where we're still going.
Okay. All right, so we'll I'm sure Meredith now is working on typing that in. With that, I will move on to, we have a number of other speakers, Councillor Sakachi, followed by Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I guess just a couple quick questions to Ms. Hoffman. So one, Ms. Hoffman, in looking at number 2, it states that that must be full vaccination in regards to if you're sitting on a committee or attending personal meetings. My challenge comes in the fact that it's very much possible that your policy will not coincide with the policy that may be that's being potentially approved here, as the fact that there's many members of ENT and staff that are required to come into our meetings to look at different aspects when we are coming to full when our meetings return, right? And my biggest concern is that I just feel that, as technically speaking, yes, we're council members, but we're also employees of the municipality. I'm just curious to see why there would not be a blanket approach by the municipality to all their staff members, instead of kind of subjecting different members and volunteers and council members to different kind of a different policy than what you may have already implemented, and how that would work if one doesn't mirror the other.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are certainly, you're going to see similarities between the policies based on the way that Councillor Foss has worded his policy. Obviously, that's a particular group of people who would be in scope, and there are some subtle differences between what you might be seeing by the way of requirements for committees, members of committees versus staff, in the same way that we're also developing, with our legal team is taking a lead on developing some policy work around contractors, because there are just simply different things that apply to how we go about the process as well. So you will see that in the report, though. You will see the difference between what our administrative policy is and what the draft is of the council policy based on the notice of motion if it passes. And obviously, certainly you can make any changes that council sees fit. Does that help?
Yes, it does. And I just wanted to clarify, just because, I'm reading the direction of the motion now, and just so everyone's, equally as aware. So this, by approving this motion today, this does not by any means approve what that draft is going to stay. This is just basically saying that you're going to be coming with a recommendation on October 4th and what that's going to include. But by supporting this policy, by supporting this motion right now, by no means are we supporting the implementation of anything until we see the policy, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
That's
for
all
council. For
That's
council,
correct.
yes.
For
Yes.
council, correct. Thank
Yes.
you.
All right, Councillor Thompson, followed by Councillor Oche.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I've been pretty clear in my comments in the local meeting in regards to how I feel about vaccinations and a person's right to choose. I'm concerned, though, jurisdictionally with number 2, and I don't imagine it would get into closed session, but we have a couple of boards that are made up of multi-jurisdictional members, the LTVCA and the St. Clair Region Conservation Authority. So could I get a little bit of an explanation? I can't see how we could say that citizen volunteers when we might not appoint those citizen volunteers to the board. It might be a different municipality.
Your Worship, it's John Shropshire speaking. Councillor Thompson, we're not in a position to dictate to the Conservation Authority what they have as a policy. Our role as an employer is to make safe work environment policies and to make sure that we're safeguarding the people that come into our building, our clients. So administration has that responsibility. The policy that's in front of you tonight is dealing with the policy that would cover our members of council. We report to council. We are not in a position to approve a policy as staff that council has not endorsed or wishes to police themselves. That's we're reporting to council, obviously, and not the other way around. So I think the motion that is before you tonight is to reflect that. I think Councillor Faw said it in his opening comments, to provide the leadership and to provide as much as we can, a consistent approach to the people that will be working together and working in the municipal buildings. So really it's up to council to decide how you want to play that out. As it relates with some of the other jurisdictions like the conservation authorities, that would have to be something that could be brought towards the conservation authorities board and have some sort of a consideration at that level. But we can't pretend to foist our policies on that different group. That's going to have to be something that the group manages themselves through the conservation authority.
Okay, so I'm trying to get that to jive in my head. Put a second way. Number one, I accept and appreciate. Number three, I accept and appreciate. But number two, again, asking in a different way, what boards would this impact? You just said it won't affect the conservation authorities. Can we imagine any other boards that this wouldn't impact?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm actually going to invite Dave Taylor just to comment on this. He's done a little bit of work for us as well on who it's applicable to and not. And so just invite him to share with you some of his thoughts, please, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Your Worship. David Taylor, Director of Legal Services. So, Councillor Thompson, to your question, I believe that the wording of the policy will address your concern. Council would only have authority to make rules that apply to appointments by council. And so the wording here is approving that citizen volunteers appointed to advisory committees, et cetera. That would only apply to appointments actually made by municipal council. And so I think your concerns of appointments from other parties would not be captured by this policy because it'd be outside of council's jurisdiction. And so, to your question of which boards would it apply to, it could apply to really any of them, which council has the authority to make one or more appointments about. Again, I believe that the policy wording can tackle the concern you have.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor O'Shea, followed by Councillor Finn.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'm not sure who this goes to, but how easy or how hard is it to fill the volunteer boards right now without any proof of the vaccination? Like when days have gone past now, but at every 4 years we have to redo the volunteer boards. How hard is it to fill them?
Thank you, Worship. Maybe just a couple of comments. We don't know the answer to that is the honest answer right now, in the sense that you haven't implemented a policy yet to see what impact that may or may not cause to your volunteers. But remember too that these policies for council will start to apply at the point in time that you start to come back together in person. So I think you have some ample time to be able to figure out how these policies will work once you decide what you want the actual content of them to be, and there will be time for discussions about that for, you know, by each committee to see how that might impact by each committee. To date, there's not any large vacancies in any of the committees, so I would say from that perspective, you're not already looking at a deficit in terms of membership. Does that help, Councillor Roche?
Not really. I guess what I mean is, well, 2 years ago, over 2 years ago now, we had to get volunteers to join, and we didn't have COVID at that time. How hard was it to fill the positions at that time?
Your Worship, there was not a difficulty in the general sense filling any of the positions.
Okay. And that must be for some of the boards, because I know the infrastructure committee has had a tough time filling it. So we're taking 25% of the people right now out of the category of being able to be on a board the way this reads at the moment. But anyways, that's fine. I too will be truthful. I have both my shots, but cannot, I'm not about to tell somebody that they need to get their shots. If they don't want to put something in their body, I'm not the one that's going to make them. Thank you.
Councillor Finn, followed by Councillor McGrail.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I'd like to state I am not an anti-vaxxer. I do believe that people have a choice. We've been in this now 18 months. A lot of people have taken precautions. They've gone to work 12-hour shifts. They have done it with PPE. They've done it, they've given from their families, they've given their all to work and for the better of the entire community. We're basing this on a lot of unknowns. We don't know how many people this is going to affect. And even when we do, and you can't even tell us when we will be taking in-person meetings because of the variant. I could still go into a grocery store. I still have to wear that face mask. I'm still expected to take 6 feet of distance, even being double vaccinated. I'm sorry, I can't approve or support any of this. That's it.
Councillor McGrail, followed by Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So I agree that, as councillors, we need to lead and show. But I just have a little problem with number 2 is that at this point, we don't know what is expected through the new policy with staff and councillors, because that's how that says. So I have a problem, going with number 2 and it being forceful like that, whereas maybe there's an option A and a B, and this is option A, but then there's a B, and then council and them have to go with the B. So I would like to see this, very similar to number 1 is, to prepare a draft that would apply to members from the vaccination policy administration is making of employees. But I'm not sure if Councillor Foz is okay with that. I wish they were the same. They will be the same, or they could be the same. We don't know.
Councillor Foss, can you clarify that number 2 is you're looking for a draft, or are you looking for approval? Because number 1 calls for a draft. Number 2 says no. Right now, council approved the citizen volunteers. Is it your intention that that is approved, or is it part of the draft that we will review in the next council meeting?
No, the intent is to approve.
Approve number 2?
That's right.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if I could just jump in, it's Kathy Hoffman again, maybe just to help with the wording with Councillor Foss's motion. When Councillor Foss spoke about preparing the motion, what he had asked for was for a draft policy to come back that would address council, but also the citizen volunteers, et cetera, the way number 2 is written out. So it was the intention that we would bring back a draft that would include both, so the scope would involve both, so that council could then vote on that. So that's really, the wording of number 2 probably should have then said that council direct administration to prepare a draft policy that would apply to, and then like citizen volunteers, et cetera. The two should have flowed, that they were meant to go together as one full policy, but I can understand that the way that they're broken out in a 1 or 2 makes it look like 1 is a draft and 2 is a fait accompli. The intention was that they would be drafts. So if Councillor Foss is agreeing with that clarification, we could do the rewording on that.
I guess that's probably the fair way to do that, but I was under the impression that we were going to approve a citizen appointee be fully vaccinated. But if that would speed things along, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so then if we would add in just a council approve, well, we put a draft that we're
report.
asking for a draft report for next week. So council, if we do that, Councilor McGrail, does that take care of your question?
It absolutely does. Thank you.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, if I might just, I didn't have a chance to come in when Councillor Finn was expressing her concern around the committee piece as well. So I do want to make sure that council is aware that in the draft that comes back, there will be an option for you to consider testing, if not vaccination. So that might be, I didn't want to leave the impression that it was drafted in one particular way right now. So if that helps at all for Councillor Finn.
Okay, Councilor McGrail, are you you're done?
I am, thank you.
All right, Councilor Harrigan.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. I'd just like to start by saying that I think we should make clear that nobody wants to be having these conversations on council. Nobody wants to be deciding about the vaccine status of volunteers or council members. Nobody really wants to be dealing with COVID in this point in time, and I think we're all sick of it. But that doesn't excuse the fact that we are still sitting in what is called a global pandemic. We are still in a community that is having one of the highest rates of COVID case counts per population and one of the lowest vaccination rates per population. And regardless of how some people are framing this, this is not something that we are imposing on people. Getting vaccinated for the against COVID-19 is still a personal choice. This policy here is protecting those in the community who are choosing to volunteer so that our volunteers don't have to worry about whether or not they are going to be exposed inadvertently to COVID-19 when they are at a point in the future coming in and having in-person meetings. And so it's concerning to me, Mayor Kenneth, that we're conflating the conversation about a vaccine policy for council and volunteers with us telling people what they're doing with their bodies. That is not the conversation we're having here. We're looking at having a discussion around how we as a community can move forward. I work in the health system. I have watched physicians, leaders, other members of the community that I have a lot of respect for breaking down because of misinformation that's being shared across the community, and this sudden perception that the conversation about vaccine is one against people's human rights. People's rights end where others begin. And I think as a council, we need to step up and take a leadership stance on this. We are not saying that we are forcing residents in Chatham-Kent to get vaccinated. I absolutely appreciate that everybody is going to make their own health decisions based on the information that's in front of them. What this policy is doing is protecting those volunteers who want to continue giving their time without having fear of being in a situation where their homes could be implicated. I'd like everybody around council to think about what would happen if you were told tomorrow that you're isolating for 2 weeks, and what disruption that would cause your family life, your personal life, your volunteer life, your ability to give back to the community. If you're double vaccinated, the impact of having a close contact is different, and it allows you to continue to still give in a way that is more impactful. So I think that the conversation that we're having here, while it's an important one, we all have to put our hands up and say, we don't want to be here. And the rest of the world will raise their hands with us and say, heck, we don't want to be here too. But taking a leadership role and supporting vaccines and saying, yes, this is a policy we're going to be committed to, helps us get one step closer out of this mess as a council, as a municipality, and as a community. So for those of my colleagues who are hesitant about supporting something like this because they feel like it forces a decision on people, I really encourage you to think about that. Look at the motion that's on here. I think Councillor Foss has done well to demonstrate leadership. And this is a motion that is really providing safeguard for those volunteers who are giving a lot of their time to the community, including those of us around this table. So that's all I have to say, Mayor Kenneth. I'm happy to support, and I invite others that are hesitant to, to think about having some conversations with Dr. Riedijk or Dr. Colby around where we are in the pandemic. It's a bit scary. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I see no other questions, so we'll put this to vote.
Judy, there, I hit the wrong button. I wanted to submit, not abstain.
You didn't abstain. I don't have anyone who has abstained.
All right.
Can you
okay,
try?
there.
There you go. All
Can I
votes
go
are in.
through?
All votes are in and motion passes 15-3.
Okay, with that, we'll move into notice of motion. Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. I have a notice of motion, and as I communicated to councillors over email, I would like to propose that we waive the notice period. So I will read the notice of motion first. Whereas the community of Wheatley is facing an unimaginable situation as a result of the August 26th explosion and state of emergency within the community. And whereas the closure and evacuation area impacts over 37 businesses. And whereas the BIA in Wheatley has taken on a leadership role in supporting businesses in community recovery and rejuvenation. And whereas the original intention of the Come Together CK grants put forward by the BIA for 2021 did not and could not anticipate the current situation in Wheatley. Therefore, I, Councillor Harrigan, move that the Together CK 2021 grants be awarded to Wheatley in 2021 for both the event $5,000 and project $8,468 be permitted to be reallocated towards the BIA's business recovery and community revitalization initiatives in 2021.
Councillor Oche, would you like to second that?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
All right. With that, then we need to determine, we need to vote on that council waive the notice requirement to allow a motion by Councillor Harrigan to be voted on at this meeting. So anyone has any questions about the 2/3 vote? Councillor Solomon, I see you see your hand there.
Councillor Solomon, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
You have a motion on the screen that says the council waive the notice requirement to allow a motion by Councillor Harrigan to be voted on at this meeting. Yet don't have a mover yet, and I'd like to move that principally because I think it's important that it not simply be brought only by councillors from one ward, but I think the people of Wheatley should know that the rest of the community supports them too.
Okay, Madam Clerk, just on that, my assumption, right or wrong, was that by Councillor Harrigan bringing that forward, that she was bringing this motion, but is that correct, or do we need a different set?
It's a motion, and it doesn't matter if Councillor Harrigan moves it or Councillor Solomon.
Okay, well, I will go with Councillor Solomon then. Councillor Harrigan, will you second that?
Yes, and the people of Wheatley are happy for Councillor Solomon's support.
Exactly. All right. So anybody else have questions? Councillor Bondi, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth. Of course, I support this in every way. I drove through Wheatley. Well, actually, I drove around most of Wheatley last weekend, and anything that council can do, of course, I think it's a unanimous decision from council, I'm sure, that we're all there, all of council. We had the premier, well, you guys had the premier come down. Our support as a council, I think, is unequivocal, and I don't think it's even debatable that all of us are together in this. And Wheatley's a little place that is just a gem in our community that we don't think about too often because it's very self-sufficient. It's its own thing, right? It's a great place. So whatever we can do now as they experience this crisis of unproportioned, we as a council, I think together we're all in this. So I don't think it's really debatable. We're all there and we support Councillor Harrigan and Oche and anything they can do for Wheatley. So yeah, I hope we all together unanimously vote to do whatever we can. I'm very pleased to see the premier and the province step up because I think that's been a bit of a challenge with this, which has been maybe a couple of months now. Let's get through the red tape. Let's get going with this and let's get Wheatley back. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Bondi. All right, seeing no other questions, we'll put this to vote.
Just a reminder, council, as we're voting, it requires a 2/3 vote. Waiting for one more, council.
Madam Clerk, Councillor Sakachi, unfortunately, I'm not able to vote right now. Obviously, I'm in support.
Okay, so all votes are in and it is unanimous 18-0. And so we can move forward with that motion now, Mayor Caniff.
Is it only me who cannot hear Mayor Caniff?
Oh, I guess it's, yes. So the Councillor Harrigan has put this forward and Councillor Oche has seconded. Is there anybody that has any questions regarding this? Or are we, okay, Councillor Harrigan, if you want to lead the lead, and if Councillor Oche wants to say anything.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. And just for context in the public, as I did send an email out to my fellow councillors over the weekend to discuss this, the Together CK grants that were applied for, the BIA had a meeting, and obviously the focus of the meeting was not the $13,000 in change in grants. It was on the Wheatley recovery. And at the end of the meeting, someone said, oh, and we have these grants. And we took a look and there was just this disheartened feeling of, you know, an event that was not going to happen, and, you know, preparation for projects for future events that just seemed to be really, really saddening. And then the BIA, as they did, turn the conversation to what they can do. And there's been some really great ideas thrown out around how they can help to have still a downtown Wheatley in some way, shape, or form, and how they can support their businesses. And the BIA had asked that I bring this forward for us to do this repurpose. We are happy to report to Council and the Together CK committee following the activities as we would with other grants. The BIA is happy to do that and happy to share what it is that they'll be doing. And I think this is one way that Council can demonstrate that we too can pivot in our processes and the grants that we give out to respond to communities in a way that they need it most. And part of the timeliness for this is also because on Wednesday of this week, there is going to be a follow-up meeting of the BIA and larger businesses within the community where we can really start to take stock about what next looks like for Wheatley as we go through what is going to be a long process for the community. And just while I have the floor, Mayor Caniff, I do want to give a huge shout out to the community of Wheatley. The BIA, the Active Citizens Group, and a number of others have stepped up in a really big way. And also to our staff in CK who have demonstrated nothing but 110% in their response and in their commitment to the community as we've worked through this emergency disaster. Thank you.
Councillor Oche, anything to add?
I think Melissa pretty well covered it all. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, Councillor Latimer.
Thank you to the mayor. I take from Councillor Harrigan's remarks that the Together CK committee has been apprised to this and are in agreement, because I certainly am in agreement with it. I don't have any fault, but I do think out of courtesy and just respect to that committee, the committee members, that they have been just notified of this.
So Mayor Kate, if I can comment that I have not sent an email out to inform the committee members, given the timeliness of this. This was a request that was brought to me late last week. So I can certainly connect with Amy Wilcox and we can pass that on. I did have a conversation with Don Shropshire around, how do we do this the most effective way, the quickest way to get this adjusted so that we can have something to focus on as a community. And it was suggested that we bring this to council because council does approve in our procedure for the grants. We ultimately approve the grants and the amounts that are given out anyway.
Yep, understood. That's great, Councillor Harrigan. I just think it's just a courtesy to that committee.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
Waiting for one more. All votes are in, motion passes.
We'll go into closed session reports. Councillor C. McGregor, then I'll have Councillor Pinsino second it.
Thank you, and through the mayor. Get this turned around here so I can read it easier. Thank you. And I would like to move the meetings of both September 13th and September 15th closed session. September 13th, all members were present. Council received information on labor relations or employee negotiations and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose with regard to mandatory vaccination policy for municipal staff, Section 2392D and F of the Municipal Act 2001, and potential litigation and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose with regard to Wheatley explosion, Section 2392E and F of the Municipal Act, and labor relations or employee negotiations with regard to compensation, benchmarking, and market adjustments, Section 2392D of the Municipal Act. And the report from September 15th, again, all members present. Council directed administration on security of the property of the municipality, potential litigation, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, and a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiation carried on by the municipality with regard to Wheatley explosion, Section 2392A, E, F, and K of the Municipal Act.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Okay. Any questions? Hearing none, we'll put it to vote.
Technical difficulties, one moment, please.
Should we go to a commercial break?
Darren, we're just having some technical difficulties. We'll be 1 minute.
Okay.
How about we just do, if anybody's opposed, Mayor Caniff?
All right. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, it's unanimous then.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. We'll go to approval of communication items. Councillor Kirkwood-White, you had a couple items that you wanted pulled, 4B and 4D.
Yes, please. Two items in the information package. The first, which is 4B, has to do with the OHIP insured eye care provided by Ontario's optometrists, and 4D has to do with the increasing unscrupulous problem of renovictions, which can directly impact our affordable housing crisis. I would like to have council endorse both resolutions and send letters off to the Premier and others that are listed in the documents.
Councillor Crew, can I get you to second that? All right, how about Councillor Finn? She looks like she's ready to do that.
Happy to second that one.
Excellent. Anyone opposed? Hearing none. As well, can I get Councillor Kirkwood-White, can I get you to approve all the other reports? And Councillor Finn, can I get you to second that?
So moved. Seconded.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. We'll go to non-agenda business. Going once, going twice. I think this is a record. The first time we've never had any non-agenda business. Reading of the first and second bylaws, Councillor Solomon and Councillor Pinsino.
Move. And I'll second it.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Reading of the third and final, Councillor Foss and Councillor Wright. Can I get you to move and second that, please?
Also move.
I'll second it.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Resolution of council. Councillor C.
Thank
McGregor,
you.
and I'll have Councillor Crew second that, if she would like to.
Thank you. And I would move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held on Monday, October 4th, 2021, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act.
Councillor Crew?
I'll second that.
Excellent. Anyone opposed?
Thank you, Councillor Crew.
Anyone opposed to winding up this meeting at 8:40 p.m.? Hearing none, motion carried. Have a wonderful night, everybody.